The story begins with Bill Pope, an intelligence agent working for the CIA, collecting the ransom money from an undercover boutique. Outside the building, Bill calls home to check on his family one last time before his mission, but he notices he is surrounded mid-call. To throw the enemies off, Bill tricks some of the men into getting stuck in a bus, grabs a random bike, and loses them. At the CIA's HQ, the agents are struggling to keep up with Bill's movement until Lynch spots him in a train station without the ransom. In the train station, Bill realizes he's been spotted, so he ditches the station and calls a random taxi dude, whom he promises to pay 20 quid extra if he borrows his phone. Bill uses the phone to contact the CIA to inform them he's on the run, and Lynch immediately sends a safe location to him. Bill, completely oblivious that the enemies have hacked into the phone, asks the taxi dude to follow the GPS directions from the CIA. Bill notices something is wrong, and an enemy corners them and guns down the poor driver. Seeing as Bill has disappeared from view, the enemies rain bullets on the car, but luckily for Bill, he dodges them all, returns a few shots, and hides at a safer angle. A few more shots into the future, Bill curses his luck when he runs out of bullets. The CIA hanging around the site loses track of Bill, and the next time Bill regains his consciousness, he sees himself strapped to a chair with Elsa and Xavier Heimdall looking at him. Heimdall picks up an electric stunner, increases the voltage, and rams it into Bill's stomach. Without waiting for Bill to gather himself, Heimdall asks him to reveal where the Dutchman is, but Bill, being the loyal agent he is, curses him out. Angered by Bill's insolence, Heimdall jams the stunner into Bill's mouth and increases the voltage to the max until he's motionless. The CIA troop barges into the building a few minutes too late to see Bill sitting lifelessly in the chair and pronounces him dead after a few tries of resuscitation. Quaker, one of the higher-ups in the CIA, visits a memory programming researcher, Dr. Franks, and orders him to make preparations to transfer the memories from a dead body to a living one. And despite being 5 years away from human practicals, Frank agrees to test his research on a specific candidate of his. At the Virginia Maximum Prison, the prison director introduces the CIA to Jerico Stewart, a ruthless criminal who is unable to grow his frontal lobe due to physical trauma. In front of his cell, the prison director informs Jericho that he's about to be taken, and Jericho asks for his lunch first. The agent loses his patience and shoots a tranquilizer at him, and when one dose does not affect him, the agent rains a couple more on him till he passes out. After the agents deliver Jericho to the CIA Air Force Base, Frank's employees transfer him to another jet to prepare him for the surgery. In the plane, Jericho realizes he's about to become a lab rat and struggles to break free, but the medical geeks suppress him. At the CIA HQ, while Lynch is watching an interview of Heimdall, justifying his acts of treason against the corrupt governors, the CIA receives news of Jericho's arrival. The surgery begins, and one of the geeks notices something is wrong. Seeing as the surgery is about to go south, Frank tries to end it abruptly, but Quaker orders him to keep going. Lucky for Jericho, his vitals return to normal, and while Frank rounds up the rest of the surgery, Quaker walks up to comfort Lynch, who is feeling worried for Bill's family. After the surgery, Quaker tries to force answers about the Dutchman from Jericho, and Jericho, still feeling the unbearable pain of surgery, responds that he knows nothing. Quaker decides to use some pain meds to extract answers, and Jericho has a few flashbacks to Bill's memory, but pretends to still know nothing. After many try and errors, Quaker gives up. He flings the pain meds and curses Frank out for wasting 18 years on nothing. Back at the CIA base, the agents replay the Dutchman's ransom request message and try to trace out where Bill might have hidden the Dutchman before his death. Meanwhile, the Dutchman, feeling weirded out by Bill's lack of contact, rings Bill's wife to ask about him, only to be told that Bill is dead. On the other hand, while the agents are on their way to dispose of Jericho, Jericho suspects that he's been set up. He waits for the agents to depart from the main team before using his teeth to rip off the iron on the car door. He secretly molds the iron into a sickle and sinks it into the driver's throat. While the second agent helps the bleeding driver, the car swerves, jams into another moving vehicle, and flings the second officer away. Jericho walks out of the car unscathed, frees himself, and stages a paper-perfect accident. In town, he steals food and drinks from a diner and beats the crap out of some street hoodlums. After beating the hoodlums to a pulp, he steals their van and drives around town with the music on full blast. All of a sudden, a piece of Bill's memory floods his brain, and Jericho sneaks his way into Bill's home. He ties down Jill, Bill's wife, and goes upstairs to check on Emma, his daughter. A sweet memory of the sleeping child creeps into his head, and Jericho returns to the room to touch Jill. He recalls the loving moments between Bill and Jill and goes to wash his face. He sees an image of Bill in the mirror and immediately snaps out of it to ask Jill to reveal where Bill kept the ransom money. Realizing that Jill knows nothing, Jericho decides to steal a bunch of stuff and leave, but Jill signals the CIA before he can leave. When the CIA calls Bill's home, Jericho answers just like Bill would've. During that time, Jill runs into her daughter's room to protect her, and when Jericho notices this, a wave of memory washes down his brain, triggering an emotion that makes him leave. The following morning, the Dutchman strikes a deal with the Russians for asylum and $10 million in cash, in exchange for the wormhole in his possession. On the other hand, Cruz, the agent who rang Bill's home the night before, informs Quaker about the weirdly accurate response from the intruder, and Lynch adds that Jericho was never identified among the bodies in the car. Piecing the dots, Quaker orders them to recover Jericho immediately. But Jericho, who has had another memory flood at a pawn shop that morning, branches at a cafe and realizes he has somehow learnt how to speak French overnight. He causes a commotion as usual and walks away, only to have another memory flood in the middle of the road. While Jericho is trying to retrace where the ransom is, he recalls Bill's interaction with the Dutchman. The CIA immediately gets signaled that Jericho's trying to log into Bill's profile and traces his last logged location to the library. Lynch and her team clock that Jericho wants to contact Frank's, and Quaker swiftly calls Frank and asks him to engage Jericho until they get to him. Jericho shows up as expected, and Frank plays along. He leads Jericho into a nearby pharmacy, and while Jericho acts crazy over his need for pain meds, Frank realizes that Bill's abilities are gradually transferring into Jericho. Jericho tells him about the strange feeling he had when he went to Bill's home, and Frank explains to him that Bill's emotions are seeping through. When Jericho tries to leave the pharmacy, Frank lies about wanting to take some tests to buy time for the CIA to get to him. Just in time, Cruz and his men ambush Jericho and force him into the vehicle, and Elsa, who had watched everything go down, trails them discreetly. In the car, Frank informs Quaker that Jericho has started adapting to Bill's routine and abilities, and if they want to get the information out of him, all they have to do is promise Jericho the bag of cash he wants, take him to the last known location of the Dutchman, and follow his leads. An agent informs Quaker about the Dutchman's deal with the Russians, and Quaker curses Frank out for picking out the worst possible candidate for the swap. In the interrogation room, Quaker offers Jericho all his heart desires in exchange for the Dutchman's location. But Jericho suddenly hits Quaker and puts him in a chokehold. Quaker stops his men from intervening and promises to give Jericho whatever he wants if he fulfills his end of the bargain. While Jericho leads the way to the infamous Dutchman, Heimdall hacks into the CIA recognition system and fakes the Dutchman's identity at an airport in London. And about the same time, the CIA spots the Dutchman and informs Quaker, who immediately calls off his deal with Jericho and leaves Jericho with Lynch. From his man cave, Heimdall interferes with the traffic signal and orders Elsa to finish them all, excluding Jericho. Just as Quaker realizes they've been played, Elsa's men gun down Jericho's driver. Lynch immediately retaliates and creates cover for Jericho to hide, but gets hit in the process, making Jericho grab the gun from the injured agent and shoot at Elsa. When Elsa sees that her men are shooting at Jericho, she orders them to stand down, and Jericho seizes the opportunity to steal a random car and drive off. Unluckily for him, the moving bridge retracts, and Jericho dives into the water with his car. On land, Heimdall orders his men to find Jericho before the Russians finish their trade with the Dutchman. And in Heimdall's man cave, Heimdall scolds Elsa for losing both Jericho and the Dutchman due to her sloppiness. He immediately realizes his mistakes and apologizes for raising his voice. On the other hand, Jericho, obviously out of the water, returns to Bill's home to treat himself. At Bill's house, Jill notices someone has broken in and grabs the emergency gun. She sees Jericho in the basement and asks him to identify himself. Jericho explains that the CIA stuck Bill's memories in his head, and Jill, like every other human, refuses to believe him. But when Jericho begins to reveal memories from Bill's past, Jill, with teary eyes, asks why the CIA chose to mess with her man. Jericho informs her that they are looking for where Bill hid a valuable asset before he died. Before assuring her that he will leave after cleaning up, Jill points her gun at Jericho, but soon softens and reluctantly walks out of the room so that Jericho can pack up and leave as promised. The Ditchman uses the wormhole to force launch a missile into the air. He realizes the missile isn't a nuke and loses his mind. Meanwhile, Jill sees her daughter playing with Jericho in the backyard and drops what she was doing. She marches into the backyard to ask Jericho to leave, and Jericho, again, promises to leave after making some waffles. Just as Jericho is about to leave, Emma offers to teach him to play the piano, but Jill interrupts them, sends Emma to bed, and looks at Jericho in anticipation of his leaving. By the door, Jill asks Jericho who he is, and Jericho solemnly explains that he can't give a definite answer because his brain has never worked right. He continues that Bill's memories have shown him to differentiate between right and wrong, before assuring her that the memories will wear off soon. Jill asks Jericho if he can also feel what Bill feels, and replicate his funny acts. And when Jericho taps his nose like Bill used to, Jill bursts out crying. Explaining that the nose flick used to be their love signal, Jericho begins to feel uncomfortable, but Jill presses on by reminding Jericho of her and Bill's wedding day. She reminds him about the birth of their daughter, and watches the hard man crumble into his feelings. Fighting off a thick force of desire, Jericho assures Jill that Bill loved her, and turns towards the door. Before he leaves, Jill asks Jericho where he plans to go, and Jericho admits he will go wherever Bill leads him to. Feeling sorry, Jill convinces him to crash on the couch for the time being. The following morning, Jericho has a memory flood about a hidden bookcase. He grabs the car and bookcase keys, and promises Jill that they're about to become stinkingly rich. A little after Jericho leaves, Jill rushes her daughter to clean up, and on her way upstairs, Elsa holds a gun to her head and asks her to produce Jericho. At the library, Jericho fishes out the ransom money and spots Heimdall on his way out. He recognizes Heimdall as Bill's killer, threatens to kill him, and threateningly leans into an iron barricade. Seizing the opportunity, Elsa grabs a wire and electrocutes Jericho through the iron barricade. When the Russian agents arrive at the border, Lynch spots them and reports to Quaker, who immediately clocks that they have come to pick the Dutchman. Quaker grabs a ride in the helicopter to follow the Russians to the Dutchman's location. Elsa's men drag Jericho into the place where they had held Jill and Emma captive, and Jericho immediately loses his mind at the sight. The men call him to order and demand that he show them where the Dutchman is hiding. Just as Jericho points at the location, Quaker, still in the air, orders his men to continue tailing the Russians silently until they identify the Dutchman. The snipers team spots the Dutchman, and Quaker orders all units to move into the building. All of a sudden, the peaceful environment turns into a battlefield of guns. Jericho informs him that the CIA doesn't have the Dutchman, and Elsa immediately orders one of her men to prepare their escape. While the others are gunning each other down, Jericho leads Heimdall and Elsa into a lab and points out the supposed location of the Dutchman. With the two ahead and out of sight, Jericho grabs a few chemicals and tosses them towards them. Heimdall and Elsa shoot at Jericho in retaliation, but Jericho finds cover, grabs another acid, throws it at them again, and kaboom goes to the laboratory. The Dutchman, who has noticed the commotion outside, tries to run away, but Jericho corners him and reminds him of Bill's deal. Jericho surprisingly tosses the bag of money to the Dutchman, flashes him his passports, and orders the Dutchman to alter the wormhole. While the Dutchman messes with the wormhole, Elsa barges in, shoots Jericho, and orders the Dutchman to hand the flash drive over. The Dutchman does as asked, and Elsa shoots him in the foot. When the Dutchman warns her that Heimdall is an evil maniac, Elsa puts a bullet in his head and updates Heimdall on her findings. Behind her, Jericho secretly grabs a cactus nursery and smashes it into Elsa's head. Still holding onto his bullet wound, Jericho grabs a lamp, knocks it head off, and rams the bottom into Elsa's head several times till she is dead. As soon as Jericho hijacks an ambulance vehicle, the CIA barges into the Dutchman's room to see Elsa and the Dutchman on the floor. An agent informs Quaker of Jericho's movement, and Quaker immediately orders men in pursuit of him. In the ambulance vehicle, Jericho uses Elsa's phone to contact Heimdall and try to get a deal out of him, but Heimdall overrules him by using Jill and Emma as bait. Realizing his family is in danger, Jericho vows to feed Heimdall to the dogs. On air, Quaker tries to warn Jericho that giving Heimdall the wormhole means burning the world down, but Jericho assures him that he has everything under control. All of a sudden, Jericho begins to lose his connection to Bill, and the CIA tries to convince him to abandon Jill and Emma. When Jericho refuses to back down, the CIA sends police cars to stop him, but Jericho manages to crash one of them. He maneuvers his way beside a truck and turns it into a blockage between him and the rest of the cars. Jericho finally gets to the exchange spot, slams into a random car, grabs his hammer, and walks out of the van. He opens the passenger door of the car and jams his hammer into the poor dude. An agent at the back shoots at Jericho, but Jericho dodges it and takes him out instead. Jill informs Jericho that Heimdall has Emma, and Jericho turns to Heimdall and shoots at all the men around him until he runs out of bullets. Realizing he's got the upper hand, Heimdall puts a gun to Emma's head and orders Jericho to drop the flash drive. Jericho grabs the flash drive and throws it at Heimdall, and when Heimdall turns around to pick it, Jericho hurls his hammer at him, creating enough distraction for Emma to run to Jill. Heimdall shoots Jericho, dips into his plane, and launches his first missile. When the CIA reaches the exchange point, Quaker grabs Jericho and accuses him of ending the world. Despite his distorted memory, Jericho manages to reveal that he made the Dutchman modify the wormhole's first missile to trace and blow up whoever activates it. On cue, the missile hits Heimdall's jet, and Jericho loses his consciousness and feels Bill's memory slip away. Months later, Jill and Emma meet up with Jericho under the CIA's supervision, and when Emma hugs him, he suddenly regains his emotions. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.